Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Rare Air Show, an alternative news network for South Dakotans by South Dakotans. And today we're in Mitchell, as you may recognize behind us, the Corn Palace. And we're here with Craig. How are you, Craig?
Good, Peter. Nice to meet you. Doing great.
Yes, very good to meet you, Craig. And Craig is he just recently was living in Seattle, and I believe moved to Missouri recently. But originally, I guess his family is from South Dakota. So you can give us a little background on your family history.
Sure. On the background, my mom was born and raised in Ipswich, and the entire family was there for years. Had a farm there. Later on, my grandparents moved to Aberdeen, so I was really a summertime kid in South Dakota. So some of the best summers of my life were spent right here.
That's very, very cool. And, to be honest, Craig, I did not know this event was going on here. Mike Lindell is actually in town here in Mitchell, and maybe you should fill us in on what's the event here this evening in Mitchell.
Well, I'll do my best. Those of you that have followed Mike Lindell over the last couple of months know that he's been trying to start his own social media site, and he's trying to get away from some of the nefarious side of the leftist media sites that are controlling the United States. So what you're seeing back here today is the opening of Frank's Speech.
That is so cool. Like I said, I was just on the way through town for work, and I saw a lot of the Trump flags, and I knew there was something going on, so I figured I'd stop. But Craig, the heart of this channel or this network here that we're trying to grow is people that love freedom and are willing to step up to the plate and put something on the line to stand up for these freedoms, these liberties that we experience here in South Dakota. So I guess we just off camera just started talking a little bit about some of the distinguishment between the terms of, say, communism and maybe Marxism. I think that's a great topic to address, especially for younger people that are kind of concerned or confused about really what's going on, these agendas that are being pushed, and a lot of times we don't even realize what is going on behind the scenes.
Peter and I were discussing this before going on film. From my perspective, one of the things that his generation, your guys' generation that are watching this on social media, is that you understand there's a real difference between socialism, communism, and Marxism. Coming from Seattle, I can tell you that we're not fighting communism yet, we're fighting Marxism, and the difference is this. If you look back historically, the International, which is what communism, or I should say Marxism, really came from, is global. They would love to see the entire earth just flooded with what Marxism looked like. If you look at the history of Stalin and Mao, they really were communists because they didn't want to deal with what it looked like to change their entire country and become international. They wanted it to be unique, but uniquely communist. And the danger right now, Peter, is that at the pace that things are moving in the United States, we're getting dangerously close to moving not towards communism, but Marxism in the United States, meaning that it would be not just in these pods like Seattle and Portland. It'll come to visit you here in Mitchell, in Aberdeen, in places up and down from the Canadian border to Mexico, and the poison is going to come in from both coasts.
Wow, that's very, very well put, and really actually helpful for me to understand, because I know a little bit of these terms, but you don't always know where they're coming from, and then you don't always know what to do in response to them. You did mention also a little bit earlier about something even in our own government that we maybe adopted or partly adopted regarding this agenda.
Yeah, if you follow the way that the elections have gone, one of the things the Founding Fathers truly expected was that the electorate had a good base of knowledge for what they were going to be voting for. They were really truly expected to know the issues. Then those people were the voters. Nowadays what you have is a voting scheme such that people that have no dog in the fight, like for example in Seattle, where those that didn't own homes or land, renters for example, they would vote on tax issues that were based on property taxes. So of course they would be voting yes to raise property taxes, and pretty soon homeowners were covering the costs of all these different issues. So what hopefully you South Dakotans will watch, and you're good with your governor right now, she's good, listen closely to the things she's saying, because truly, you've got to watch your elected officials enough to know where the momentum is going within the electorate. If you get the sense that your vote doesn't count, and if the machinery behind it is changing the nature of the election by who gets certain percentages, like if I vote for X and they get 1.1% of the vote, and someone votes for Y and they get 0.9, you've got to be aware of those things, because the truest danger of this is the momentum. If we keep going down this road, no election will count and people will stop voting. And I'll give you one other example of that. When I moved to Missouri, there was an election there in April, and I didn't get my license changed, so I couldn't vote in that election because we were trying to get everything set up in the house. When I read the local newspaper that next day after the election, 13% of the population voted during that election. 13% of the population made decisions for me. If that 13% are the people that are moving more towards Marxism, then folks, the momentum is such that you're going to get crushed by it.
Oh man, what a great wake-up call. And that is so true, especially in states and areas that we're still tend to be maybe more on the pro-freedom side, but yet if we don't get involved at a local level, and we don't make sure that these checks are in place, or if we're not taking action, it's very easy. The extremists from the other side, they know what they need to do. And I think you mentioned that earlier. Like they have momentum going, and they know the tactics, they know what they're doing. And so if we just kind of sit back and think, well, we're in a pretty good state, and if we're not careful, we maybe could be blindsided.
Yeah, and Peter and I were talking. I'm going to send him some links, and hopefully he'll be able to post them on some things that came out of the 50s and 60s, things that for the most part my generation isn't even aware enough of these things. So it's really important, I guess, that you go into the nature of politics understanding that you're only as good as your understanding of history. And I think it was Harry Truman that said the only history that hasn't been understood is that hasn't been read yet. And that's really true. And it's how it changes from generation to generation. I was ignorant, not by choice, but by how my educational process worked. All the way up into college, I would get certain classes, and truly things were being hidden from me because the agenda was set such that I was going to fold into these envelopes just by the nature of what I came out with through the educational process.
Yeah, very true. And again, with the topic of education, it's not always easy to know what sources to go to, what are credible sources. That's part of the confusion of social media, maybe, is to know really what is sound information to be taken in.
Okay, there's something here, Peter, that we didn't talk about that's new for him. What I want to challenge everybody to something out there with this. Realize that when social media, well, not so much social media, when the internet came out, when computerization really took hold, some of the textbooks that you might have read have actually been changed. If you find a source that is older than the internet and you read some of those sources that have been posted on the internet, they are not the same, and some of these are classic books. So I urge you, if you're going to look up something on the internet, go find the original sources as much as you possibly can.
That's very, very, very solid right there. I'm really grateful for that point. And what I guess I would just sort of close out here with what your concerns are, or what you think our concerns are, should be here in South Dakota. You have family here still, but a state that is, again, we're on the right track in a lot of ways. We have so much here, and we're really grateful for those freedoms that we still experience, but we can't let them be encroached upon.
Okay, here's the thing that I would hope for you, that the 20 and 30-year-olds realize that it starts at the ground level. So if you're going to get involved in politics, writing letters and emails is fine, but you've got to get involved with city councils and school boards in your 20s. Go in there, listen carefully to what's being presented, and then go back to Peter's site and look at some of the things he posts and see if what you're hearing isn't more towards what Marxism means as opposed to what it means to be a free American.
Wow, that's great stuff, Craig. So grateful for your time here, and again on the Rare Air Show, promoting the ideals of personal liberties. And any other closing comments, Craig?
I think lastly is my generation. I'm 63. When I was Peter's age, we still had a lot of time to look at some of these sources to try and educate ourselves. But if we made mistakes, it was okay because our parents were still holding the line, the greatest generation. For you guys in your 20s and 30s, momentum is not on your side. If you don't do this personally, I'll just make a stab at a guess here. If you don't get to the grassroots level and you don't do the work, you won't have time to overcome the momentum at the pace at which it's going to change. It'll pass by you, it'll destroy your freedoms, and you won't have a chance to put it back together again.
Well, that's a little bit of a sobering challenge, but I think there's a lot of us that are up for the challenge, and we'll do our best. And with God's help, there's anything is possible. So, Craig, thanks so much again. Godspeed in your travels, and glad you got to spend some time here in South Dakota.
Thank you so much. And South Dakotans, you have to hold the line. Unfortunately, some of the poison that you're feeling is coming from both coasts. The most important thing you can do is be studied. And when you run into people, be sure that you hit them with facts and figures, and then that is the disinterested third party. Don't argue with them personally. Give them some kind of reference to go to, and then go back and argue that point. Then you can't argue it negatively or positively. A fact is a fact. It's not negative or positive. It just is. Good luck to you.
Thanks so much. The truth will always win. Thanks a lot, guys.